Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is the 3 components of love and maintaining complete love throughout the years.
And we'll describe what complete love is. We're not going to keep you in suspense too long. So let's actually lay out what we're going to cover today, because love, it almost can seem like this word, like when you hear goals, for example, and you're like, whatever, goals, I've heard that before. Oh, love. It's something we all want. It's something we all want to maintain. It's also difficult to describe. And what is it when people say, oh, I've fallen out of love? We fell out of love. What does that even really mean? And so people are always trying to describe what it is, how to maintain it, how to get there. So we're going to go into one model by psychologist Robert Sternberg back in 1986 called the triangle theory of love, not to be confused with a love triangle, right?
Where these are completely different things.
And we're not talking about 3 people in a relationship together, right? The triangle theory of love and his 3 components of love. And we've done other episodes where we've given you different frameworks and philosophies for love, because again, everyone's trying to describe what it is and how to maintain it. But these 3 components, we're going to not only describe them for you, we're also going to cover different variations of relationship, like what does a relationship look like when there's only 1 component or 2, and then ultimately how to create a relationship, a marriage, where you have all 3 components, and how to actually maintain those in a practical sense. When you are busy, you have different circumstances, you're together a long time. So that's where we're going to head towards the end of the episode.
Yeah, I just love this framework. I think it's really one of the most intuitive and practical. Mm-hmm. You know, how can you be in a marriage, let's say, where you feel like, oh man, in the past we used to be this way, and now it's just kind of like we're friends and roommates. It's like, well, what really happened to change that, for example? And we're not just talking about marriage. This is really from social psychology. How do we form relationships? Mm-hmm. And so we'll talk about components that are non-romantic in nature, but you'll see how the mix can change, having you feel like you are in a different season or experience of love, even being married. Mm-hmm. And then again, as you said, the whole point is, well, how do we come back to what is actually termed complete love?
Yes, exactly. So the 3 components. First one is commitment. So this component is the decision to be devoted to each other and build a life together, including working through challenges. So think about that. At what point did you commit? How long ago did you walk down the aisle or say, we're going to build a life together, we're going to be together, we're going to do this thing together? How long ago was that? And are you present to your commitment today? Are you present to the fact that you chose this person and you decided we're going to get through thick and thin, as they say, right? We're going to work through the challenges. We're going to work through the highs and the lows. But again, it's that devotion to each other and choosing to build a life with someone.
Which is more particular when we get into the romantic variations. I will say you can have commitment in a non-romantic relationship as well. So It's not that you're necessarily committed to build a life together. It could be a commitment towards the deepening of a relationship.
So you're talking about like a friendship where you're saying...
I didn't want to spoil anything yet. But yes, this would be like a close friendship.
Yeah, but I think there's an extra level of commitment when you choose to build a life with someone.
Yeah. And so that adds in our second component, which would be closeness. And closeness being the emotional bond or depth of knowing another person. So it's really about getting to these deeper layers. We'll mention again a little briefly, but later there's this social psychology penetration theory, which is just that you could stay surface level. You could also have broad topics that you talk to or talk about with someone, but the closeness in terms of like connection comes from you being able to go deeper, like going through the layers, getting to more of the inner core self, opening up to each other, being vulnerable, sharing feelings. And again, these are just components, and this can exist in a friendship, for example. And this is just that component of this closeness, this depth of your understanding of another person.
I just feel like giving this quick example. We were watching this show last night, Sheldon, and there was this moment that I wish I could show it online because it was just so pertinent to marriage and this opportunity for closeness. And what was happening was they were starting to bicker, this married couple that had 3 kids. They're bickering with each other, they're being snappy, and she goes to him and she says, "Can you tell me, is something going on?" Because he was acting really distant. Again, they were being really short with each other, and he actually just got vulnerable in that moment. And he said, "Things are really hard at work. I might get fired." And tears started to come to his eyes. And what he did in that moment was he chose closeness. They had a moment of being close, and she went up to him and she hugged him instead of, reacting back to it and it becoming a whole thing. So I just wanted to give that example because when I watched that, I was like, that is what's missing for so many couples. And I know we're going to get into these different types of relationships here in a moment, but I think it's important that we really think through that right now. Do you two just talk at the surface level of things, or do you actually prioritize closeness and opening up to each other?
Yeah. So let's add in the third component, and this is passion. So this is the one that is specific to the romantic types of relationships, and that's where there's physical and emotional desire for the other person. This includes romance, there's a physical attraction, there's physical intimacy. So this is the component that gets added in for romantic relationships. Now, as we go in, you can have a romantic relationship that doesn't have any more passion.
Right.
And so don't want to give it away, but that's where we're headed.
I think so. A client just a little bit ago used a great word when we were talking about this, and she said electricity. She said that when they're talking about life goals, or they're really catching up, or they're talking about a topic that they're both passionate about, she said she feels this electricity between them. And I thought that was a great way. Now, I'm not saying that every dinner you and I go to, we're like feeling electric, right? Like that's not the expectation. But I do think that passion isn't just in the bedroom. It is, I think, a draw to each other. It's, I look forward to seeing you. It's even a flirtiness. We're going to talk about, how to maintain these, but I don't want everyone to just get caught up that it's just that you walk in the door and you want to push them against the wall and it's in the bedroom. Like that isn't the only expression of passion, but it is that attraction. It is that desire for each other, and that you do feel some aliveness in your conversation or when you're around each other, as opposed to kind of stale energy.
Oh, wow.
Just to get straight up about it, stale.
So when we take these 3 components and we put them together in different mixes, then you can get 7 variations for almost any type of relationship. So let's start to walk through this. Let's start with just liking someone. And so this is where you have the closeness aspect, but without commitment or passion. So you can, meet someone and you can feel like, wow, we didn't just stay surface level. Exactly. We created some depth. Maybe there was a little bit of revealing. Maybe there's some vulnerability. Maybe you shared something personal about yourself. And so you can get to a place where, you like someone because there's a level of closeness that's
I just
there.
thought that's how I feel about my therapist.
Oh, okay. Interesting,
Like we don't have a commitment towards each other in terms of we don't hang out. We're not building a life with each other. We're not trying to be friends. We also don't have passion, not a priority, not what I'm there for, right? But there is closeness. And so that's one relationship I just thought of that fits in that liking. I think you could also feel that way towards coworkers too. Like you're not going to hang out. You're not committed to building like a relationship outside of that. But you're like, I like them, or, we really do share things about our lives with each other.
And I think every one of these, you could think about a married couple could fall into these, because this, as we go through this, it's really about the mix and how it can change. So you could go through these stages and then you could be married. And then over the years, you get to the place where you don't really have the level of passion, and maybe you start to feel from various things, the commitment, you're not sure about your commitment there. Or maybe it's more of like a dating relationship, right? It's like, there's not so much passion. I'm not committed to this relationship long term. So you've got some closeness. So you're really just in the stage where, I like them. But you're not going to be putting as much time, effort, attention, energy maybe towards that relationship.
True.
So let's move into the second variation here, which is friendship love. This is where we build upon that closeness and we add commitment. still without that passion, and is this companion love. Like you really deepened a friendship.
Yeah, I think a lot of couples could certainly get here. Like this is where you could get stuck and people say, I feel like we're roommates because you're committed to each other. Again, you're in the home, you're building a life together. Maybe there's some closeness because you have good conversations, you do open up with each other, but passion starts to get deprioritized. And again, we're going to talk about strategies to maintain this, but don't panic if some of you are going, oh, this is where we are. You know, we don't have the passion. It's okay. You're not stuck here. These aren't places that you are then like destined to be forever. These can be stages. And we certainly can move towards what we're going to get to, the complete love, having all three.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like this is a linear process, because if you thought about it, of moving through the level of deepening a relationship with someone, yeah, you can move into friendship, so there's not going to be passion, but you could have had passion and then it went away, right? So again, not like a linear process through this. So now let's go into the third variation, which we'll call, or is called, infatuation love, which is just all passion now. So we're bringing the passion element in, and there's no closeness, there's no commitment. You might just see this as a fling, or it's really how most romantic relationships get their start, right? There's a lot of attraction towards someone. There's this infatuation, there's all this passion. Now, you could start with a desire to have this relationship, right? And maybe it's not reciprocated. So obviously we're talking about where the two people reciprocate and now there's passion between the two of them. Yeah. And yet hasn't developed further to have the closeness or the commitment.
These ones typically don't last, or if they at all extend for a few years, they are very turbulent typically because...
Well, if you don't deepen the closeness or commitment.
Right, and that's where people might resort to, all we need is makeup sex. Like all our relationship, all we do is we have to argue and then have makeup sex. It's like, okay, maybe because you can rely just on passion, but in terms of building a life with someone, being able to work through the challenges and get to a healthy, harmonious place, you can't bank on just that infatuation. And so we don't want to think, my old self, or I guess I should say my younger self, so prior, it definitely was about, well, I just feel this draw to them, right? And so much of it was more chemically related rather than me knowing how to seek a healthy partnership, really, that has all three.
Mm-hmm. Or start to take it to, the next level, which... I know some of us does feel like it's building, and partly it is. You could then move to romantic love, where you have the passion, and now you add in closeness, just without commitment as of yet.
Yeah. I felt this. I remember when we were even dating, I could recall this.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember being the first one to tell you I love you. I remember the first one that was ready for commitment and you weren't. By the way, guys, I won't rehash the whole story.
I was probably resistant to closeness.
Oh.
Now that I realize.
But you also tried to break up with me. You were resistant to commitment too.
More than resistance probably to commitment.
Exactly. So we definitely had our stage there. Obviously, we moved through that. You put a ring on it. The commitment was there. But definitely romantic love can be a stage of relationship prior to like, ooh, who's going to ask, if we're together, are we in a relationship? That's a time that you're like excited and nervous in the relationship.
I suppose that's what The Bachelor, maybe more so Love is Blind, is trying to foster, right? And I guess in both of them a little bit different, but like on The Bachelor, there's attraction, there's physique. You could, you can have all this passion, like just sex drive, sex desire, basically. And then maybe not so much with The Bachelor, like you're trying to develop some closeness. You're trying to discover where you have some compatibility,
but it
some
really
similarity.
Is still surface level. It's like they think they
go
deep.
It's only a TV show.
It's like 3 weeks long. How close can you get in 3 weeks?
Yeah, well, you can't get to commitment. I mean, that's for sure in 3 weeks. But just the point being that you start to develop that closeness, and how do you do that, right? And that Love is Blind, right, takes out the physical part of it to see, can someone build passion just through the closeness, developing the closeness. And
commitment. They commit because they get on their knee quick. So they actually start with commitment almost. If you think about it. Or they start with closeness, then they create commitment, and then they see if passion's there. But I think that even the closeness, you really can only get so close until you've spent a lot of time with someone. Because I can self-report like, oh yeah, I'm a family person and I work hard and I'm a clean person. I can self-report those things. And then there's you seeing me in my real life, seeing me with my friends, seeing how I handle this and that. So
it's the difference between saying you value something and actually acting it out,
right,
which we've covered.
Closeness takes time, basically. Really getting the deeper layers.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I would not argue with that. It is also, couples can be together for a long period of time without having the willingness to reveal, to open up, to be vulnerable, to deepen that. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, now we're going to start to take some things away. And so we have shallow love. And that's where you have the passion and you have commitment, but now without closeness.
Yeah, I think that a lot of couples could get here and not realize it because they don't know how to develop closeness, or because they have their guard up for some reason. They never really opened up emotionally to someone. So I think a lot of couples can be here where it's like, yeah, you might know them to a degree, but you don't go to those deeper layers with each other.
There's a different term that Robert used, but to me, I liked shallow. But now that I say it, it feels like a little bit kind of rough for this category of relationship, right? Like shallow. I think it might have been infatuation love potentially, but because, you have that passion, you have that commitment, and that can go for a while, I feel, right? It's like, no, this is working out pretty good. But what we're getting to is the complete love. So you can't stay in that stage forever. Now let's do one more before we do get to complete love. We're going to remove one more thing. And so the sixth variation is empty love.
Yeah.
And this is now where you have the commitment. So going back to your other point, I would say there has to be an amount of time. I mean, very likely you had passion, you had the closeness, you developed it into commitment. And then now over time, we'll talk more about this, but for various reasons now you've lost the passion and the closeness and you're left with commitment. And so this is a lot of long-term marriages. It could also be, I was thinking about this with family members. It's places that you feel a certain obligation. So with family, that you can just have commitment. This is my family. These are my parents. These are my siblings. This is my uncle, cousin. So like I have a commitment.
I see them at the holidays. I, talk to them from time to time about surface level stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's obviously no passion there. And then the closeness is, you aren't taking the conversations deep enough to really reveal like more of your inner self.
Now I know some of you heard that one and related to your partnership and your marriage. You're like, oh, what if we're there? Don't worry. Again, you don't stay stuck there unless you choose to and put no effort in. We're going to be going there in just a moment, but don't get discouraged. Couples get here sometimes. Doesn't matter if it's 10 years in, 30 years in. It's really about if you want to work your way towards this one, Aaron. So why don't you introduce complete love, which is the goal, right?
Yeah, it's the ideal. It's having all three. So you have the commitment, you have the closeness, and you have the passion.
Yeah.
And it is hard to maintain. And certainly, I mean, I didn't date that very many people, but maybe some people listening did date a number of people. And it's like, well, yeah, we were never able to put all three in, hence why the relationship probably eventually ended. And then likely you chose to marry the person that you're with now because you did click on all three of those, most likely. And it is, though, hard to continue to maintain through the years because of a number of things, various external stressors, economies, life situations, losing a job, having children.
Well, people also get complacency is a place that you can get stuck, like an attitude.
You have to maintain effort. You have a lack of repair. Things happen. You get hurt, you get offended, but no one repairs anything. You don't initiate repair. You stop making as many love account deposits, so you have a low love account. Things happen intentionally and unintentionally where you have broken trust. And then more like what you were saying, you just have the daily routine of life and you fall into just the management which is an aspect of life, right? It's you have a home that you own, you have cars, you have bills, you need to put food on the table, you need to cut the grass or pay someone to do all that. It's like you have to manage life. And so really by sometimes no fault of your own, you go from this complete love and then fall into maybe the shallow love or into sometimes the empty love.
I do want to say, though, that with this complete love, there isn't like this perfect destination. Think of these as being a little bit on like a spectrum
Yeah, good point.
or a range. So, for example, with passion, I wouldn't say you and I are running on all cylinders 10 out of 10 right now, because we could blame it on, for example, like just having a child and being more tired from that and running a business. And it isn't like the top 3 priorities. However, it's not deprioritized. So I think it's on a range. I also wouldn't say we're at a 0 or we're even at a 3 or at a 5. I would say, if I were to give this really a scale, like we're at a 7 out of 10 with intimacy, right? So you can be on a scale. I don't want you to think that what you see in the movies where they're pushing each other against the wall, that's what I always visualize when I think about this passionate love. It's like, it doesn't have to be there to say that you have passion in your relationship. It's relative. If you have a newborn baby, passion's going to look a little bit different, but do you still have an affinity for each other? Do you still have that magnetism, some attraction to each other? You desire to be around each other. And we'll go into this, but passion in particular, the longer you're together, the more circumstances you face, the more comfortable you get, it takes more effort. That's actually going right into, I guess we could lead right into it. We wanted to give you some practical ways to maintain complete love. So since I started there with passion, it takes more effort than you realize. Now, are there the outlier couples who do just feel like this boom, this attraction, crazy fire passion? Sure. But that isn't the average. And so remember that unless you fall into the outlier category, you're going to need to be thoughtful and intentional about maintaining passion. So, for example, number 1, since a lot of it is physical, what are you doing to stay attracted to each other? Is that taking care of yourselves? Is that, like, I know for me, I feel better about myself. I show up better when I actually get ready. You know, I'm not just in mom mode, PJs and hair in a bun. Now, you certainly see me there, right? And I ask you once in a while, are you still attracted to me when I'm like this? And you say yes, right? Like we still are attracted to each other in those relaxed states, but I love it when I feel better getting dressed and taking care of myself. And you and I both value our physical bodies and our well-being. And so there's that element of maintaining this, but also maintaining that energetic attraction to each other, being physically intimate. It's not going to be just resorting to the same old. That's going to feel boring and routine. So especially for women, it takes more for us to feel desire and to feel satisfied. You could read endless reasons of why that is, but it might be like, hey, let's learn something new. You know, let's take a quiz about our, sex drive type. Let's read a book. Let's attend an intimacy workshop. You have to do things to actually bring some new excitement and energy. And I think you wrote here spontaneity. Do you want to address some of that?
Just keeping it short, that certainty is the killer of passion. I think even Esther Perel had that in her book, Mating in Captivity. And so, that's the interesting thing. We move through these components, right, of like closeness and commitment and stability and trust and security. And you need all that, but you have to balance the spontaneity. Like the passion really lives in the unknown. It's the uncertain aspect. And you have to be very intentional to bring that back in, because both of the other components are about the stability, right? And I would also say more practically, I think letting go of time components. This might be a difference for men and women, but it's like, oh, I want to be intimate with you and it's only going to take X amount of time, or we only have X amount of time, like the baby's napping, or, for you and I, it's like we have a session coming up in an hour. So I think it's just being able to be intentional with the time, like setting the time. And then it's really such a balance of, even though you had to put time constraints on it, you really want to be more in the unknown. I think you want to to play in it. You kind of want to feel like maybe you don't know what you're doing with something in particular. Like it's a new expression, it's a new position, something like that.
Well, remember too, it is tactical. So use the senses. Music is powerful. Like I remember when we attended this intimacy workshop, one of the things that made like a visceral difference was the music that was on. So even play with sound and smells, and, lighting candles. I've actually been hearing a lot of couples talking about like buying lingerie, right? Like, and of course we're not trying to get too exaggerated, but you can get toys. Like what is it that you're going to do to excite the senses and create some of that unknown, as opposed to, hey, you in the mood? And you're like, what's the effort here? Like, am I supposed to just be
ain't going to be the
available
same thing.
right away?
It's going to be in 15 minutes. There's a good point about the sensations. I think there's trying to heighten sensations, and you can do that by reducing other sensations. So maybe you take the visual out of it. And ultimately, I would say also focusing on being more giving to the other. I think that would really add to the passion element here.
Absolutely. So a lot there with maintaining that intimacy, that passion. What about staying close, right? And of course, we've talked about this emotional intimacy being so important, and it can be even more important for women, or we experience it differently a little bit. But some tools, and we're going to be anchoring to principles we talk about in our episodes and in our tools all the time. Don't forget about the love account principle, right? Being able to realize that you don't just feel close by a once a week or once a month date. Like that isn't the only time. That closeness is adding up all the small things every day that have you feel seen, loved, appreciated. It doesn't have to be grand gestures. It can be as simple as putting your phone down and really being present for a conversation, being engaged, asking more questions. It's touching them as you walk by. It's instead of being like, oh yeah, that work meeting was fine. It's like, where's the depth there? What if you actually shared how you're really doing? Whether that's you're really excited about something, share the excitement about that project. Or if it's hard, share that. So those are different ways to be able to maintain your love account. And then second to that is maintaining your family meeting check-ins. And this is a tool, if some of you are new to us, we have a whole family meeting guide. We can link these resources too in the show notes, but the family meeting guide, we have a weekly, a quarterly, and a yearly. It's a way to ask intentional questions with each other and to not just stay at the surface, to check in on us. How are we? Not just what do the kids need? What errands do we have to run? How are we? That is a great way to make sure that things don't pile up for weeks and weeks and weeks, and all of a sudden now there's a lot that comes out. By the way, the family meeting guide, because we'll link that in the show notes, you can get that separately. You can also get it included in the 30-day couples challenge, which we're going to keep that open for just a couple more days because so many of you have messaged being like, is it too late? We just found you. Can we join? So we're keeping it open for just a couple more days. So go to mycoupleschallenge.com. You not only get the daily prompts to maintain your love account and build that up, but you get the family meeting guide included in that.
So just to round this out, it's also defined by social psychology penetration theory, which we mentioned early on. It's that you really have to continue to share deep and vulnerable rather than shallow or just surface level topic specific or just broad range of topics. And, in a marriage, it's like you're going to cover most of the topics. So you do need to go broad, but you need to make sure that you're going deep into those as well, moving towards sharing more of the inner self. And the inner self isn't like always, let's say, happy and joyous and bouncing off the walls and celebratory and appreciative and grateful.
There's the not so great too.
Yeah, and I think, that's really the place for me. That's a big eye opener. Is if you think about the experience that you have as an individual, like how much of the time are you, say, happy versus sad versus neutral? It's like whatever percent you want to give to it. It's about sharing all of yourself. So if you're holding back these things that, well, it's negative, or I'm not going to share it, or it's vulnerable, you're keeping your depth of closeness at a particular level.
Yeah. So something to consider for all of you listening right now is, do you open up to each other? And when you are opening up to each other, are you receptive to each other? Or do you miss the mark and then give them fixes, give them solutions, or take something personally? Again, going back to that moment in that show I mentioned, she could have very easily been like, what? If you get fired, we're not going to have any money. And like then made it all about her panic and her worry. And then he would have probably felt more shut down. But it was a moment where she just hugged him and she just said, I'm sorry, because he was opening up about how he was feeling with work. So that could have been a potential conflict or a disconnect. So look for those mini moments when you're opening up to each other and you can create closeness.
Mm-hmm. So let's round this out with the commitment now. Mm-hmm. So how do we maintain commitment? And I think over the years, it's just realizing that life is about challenges. And do you have attitude of quitting or being determined? It's staying engaged to actually work through conflict when it comes up. Mm-hmm. It's being willing to go through a repair, hear the impact that you've had on your partner, take responsibility where you can, and sometimes put your own feelings of hurt or feeling offended to the side so that your partner can actually feel repaired by something, which is very closely linked for me to, you have to actually choose to act from this commitment as just a decision, or a decision about your future self or your future, right? So if I'm going to act from a commitment, I kind of have to think, well, what future do I actually want? Mm-hmm. What's my future self or the future relationship? And having that drive your action in the present, well, you would think, well, what's the other way to go about it? Well, then you're just impulsive. You're hurt, so you have an impulse to hurt back. Or you're hurt, and then you have an impulse to close off. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a big issue for marriages and for relationships right now. Overall, I think, I don't know what it is, whether it's social media or just our society or that we're more online, or whatever it is. It's like we have this quickness to be able to just say our offense, and there's obviously like no real repercussion or consequence. So we're able to just say it, rather than maybe back in the day, it's like you needed to share something. You also had to deal with the response or the reaction with another person. So maybe it gave you pause. And if you're just wanting to actually have deep relationships, have a complete love relationship, it can't stay surface level, and you have to go into the hard things. So you just have to, I think, hold back sometimes these impulses that could be kind of selfish or come from just this, you're going to hear me out, right? This kind of self-focused place, and just realize, well, what am I committed to beyond this moment? And put yourself a little bit further out and then act from that commitment.
I want to make something really clear. Commitment isn't just being there and being like, well, I'm not going to divorce you, or I'm not going to break up with you. I want to make sure, because everything you said is so great. And I want to make sure that no one thinks that just because you're going to say, I'll just bunker down and survive 30 more years with you. No, I think commitment of all you said is saying, when we encounter challenges, I'm willing to work on it. Commitment is tackling the challenges, not going, well, I'll still be with you, but those things that you say I do that affect you, I'm not going to work on those. That's not commitment. That's just survival.
Well, yeah, that's a great point, because if you only had the commitment, then you're back in the variation of empty love, where there's no passion and there's no closeness. Yep. So that's really a great way to close this out. You also have to be committed to maintaining the passion and the closeness and all that we just talked about.
Yes.
So funny how commitment has a real intertwined dynamic with intimacy and, closeness and passion, in which, well, lastly, not to just keep on going, but they all play a role, right? And they all kind of are a dance together, right? Because our previous episode, we talked about male and female and the physical intimacy versus emotional intimacy, and how often do we talk to couples where the female partner does need more closeness or isn't feeling closeness and then has a resistance to the passion.
Exactly. Now, remember, you're not stuck in any of these. If you felt like one or two elements need some work, then just commit to it. Make it a priority. We see couples rebuild their partnerships all the time. And if you're new here, make sure you not only subscribe to our podcast, by the way, you have to actually hit the subscribe button so that you can see additional shows, but also make sure you're using our resources. We make them so affordable so that you don't have to feel like it's a stretch. And it's also realistic to do these. So if you don't have our steps to rebuild a marriage guide, if you don't have our steps to repair from conflict, because commitment is working through challenges, commitment is learning to fight in healthier ways. So use our resources. In addition to the challenge, all of those can be found at meetthefreemans.com/links. That's where you're going to see everything from our in-person couples workshops to our guides to our challenges, a wait list for sessions, but utilize all of the resources that you have and really implement the skills that we talk about. But with that, we hope that this episode was enlightening and that you take it and implement it into your relationship. And we appreciate you, and we will talk to you on the next episode.